Jose.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll just start by reminding everybody where we are in the process. Of course, we we are we have been setting the objectives already in the first week, then identifying target audiences and mapping the stakeholders as we were discussing last week. And today is the day where we are going to discuss different tactics to see within a particular context what is the best way to achieve what we want to achieve with the stakeholders. And if you have read the module 3, you probably have seen the description of the different public, private advocacy um, techniques, the possibility of using persuasion. We're going to talk about persuasive communication today as well, mobilizing stakeholders around a particular goal, which is another way of undertaking advocacy, and also the maybe the most popular or seen as very typical advocacy technique of public denunciation, no? Naming and shaming. You will also probably have seen different approaches for protecting civilians, which are in the ALNAP document, and you have the link in the module. And there again, they talk about naming and shaming, mobilizing, then capacity building activities, are a very interesting way to pursue advocacy. And there, I think our guest Umio Win will have a lot to say. And of course, different attitudes that you can have in your advocacy approach. If it's going to be publicly debating with your targets about what you want to achieve, if it's going to be the same type of, let's say, confrontational communication but privately, or if you are going to try to persuade your target using positive messaging, which is clearly another option. Matt and me have been looking at the stakeholder mappings that you have undertaken, both in the Miro board and the Padlet, what you have written also in the Word documents. In general, there's been a lot of good work, very good examples from Guatemala, from the female genital mutilation in Guinea. There's a very good one. Gaza Durable Solution Strategy by Adam. The Yemen example is also very good. Philippines with Willing and Eritrea with Walters. Besem, I mean, all of you have done a very good analysis in general and have mapped the stakeholders very well. So the question today is, how do we move forward tactically? What are we going to do? And we have today with us two very good speakers. Ethan from the Governance for Power organization, or Organizing for Power, very experienced advocate in the area of labor rights. And we also have with us Umio Win, who is a Rohingya civil society leader in Myanmar, currently in US for a variety of reasons. And I hope that we have a good discussion with them today. So maybe let's begin with Umio Win. if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about the different tactics um, that you have used in your advocacy work, and also mm, what will be your tips for persuasive communication. So the floor is yours, Ubia.
Thank you so much, and all the Jose and also the who are organizing for this important, the sharing program, and also thanks to my fellow speaker too. I will be here in very short, and but I would like to be strategically, but this issue is in strategy and tactics issue is if we talk about in my work in Burma is so sometimes we can say like strange and crazy. Everything we do for like our work with the strategy, but the tactics, but the same. We are implementing in the different level or different flexibility that I'd like to be highlight for the issue of my experience in Burma. So Burma is, I can say previously, we are not in the inside part of the wall. We are like a little bit outside of the wall because everything is chaos. And then situation like very strange. We cannot be moved forward. Step by step. But the people who live, of course, the Jose was the spent almost for 3 or 4 years, So I mean, he aware of that, condition in Burma, even though so-called under the democratic transition and even the challenge, So I mean, the government has not really good policy, to dealing with the people. That, to be honest, and now it's like military coup is more like chaos, and everything everyday change, everyday change, every minute, every hour that changes is huge, So not like compare with a stable country like developed country, when I mean, here in United States, I'm reviewing some of the master student paper. They are quoted in some of the 10 years ago book and 7 year ago book in their library. But unfortunately, Burma, like, situation is quick change, so they cannot, their reference for 10 years ago book is totally different in current condition, So I mean, not like in United States or Europe or, some, stable, developed country, even in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, they are stable country. You can see, pattern of the, but that is the way who are working in Burma, or not only Burma, I think the South Asian country. I would like to focus on like Burma or Sri Lanka or some even India. Even India is also the world biggest democracy country. Also changes a lot, because of that. So-called under the name of nationalism, so-called under the name of patriotism, so-called under the name of the popularity, so popularism. That's all are, exists on this instability of the country, and divisiveness, segregation. So these all are, very difficult to be strategized, to be a, succeed for your work. So bad. In my experience, the we are doing a lot of range of program, So I mean, that is like, for example, like, recently we have a target area. We are doing the strategically for implementing for some target area in Burma. But recent crisis, even in less since October to now, insurgent group and military are fighting, means a lot of areas are we cannot go, we cannot cover. So as soon as we have to change, how we can do it, how can achieve in that. So I mean, strategically, we have to be, number one is like to overcome for this situation is like, I like to focus on the number one point is like, always you are tracking the information, data, ground situation, everyday update. that is very important for working for Burma or, of South Asian, even Bangladesh. I can say recently they have a big crisis against for opposition group, demonstration against for the ruling party. So not like in South Asian country, demonstration is how deviate the work of different group, but not like in United States or Europe, it's different. Even they have a demonstration, but people are keep going their own work. But these are different ideology. Number one is like you have to be always tracking your data, information, and the crisis, and so always overviewing for your work and how to way forward, how to overcome for your condition on that point. So that is number one. I'd like to be based on my experience is that important, particular for developing so-called under the name the country called developing country. So but it is like very polite usage. To be honest, we are not so much developed. That's why they choose developing country. So so that is the first point. The second point is like if you achieve for your work, so you have to do a lot of informal engagement and formal engagement. Yes, sometimes formal engagement is like one way. We at the same time you have to do informal engagement. Sometimes we are also among the stakeholder we do for Texas understanding MMS. Texas understanding, but we are doing something, but we are not technically write down or technically say A to Z. So that's informal Texas understanding MNS. That also very much working on that. Furthermore, like we are dealing for citizenship documentation issue. So we never get the official uh, uh, permission. But we deal with the authority informal way. So that so the authority even said yes or no, not saying yes or no, but they know what I do. We know also what his position. So we do make ourselves informal agreement on working to establish on that. So that also very important. I like to be highlighted that. So at the same time for the Rohingya genociding, a lot of people in the authority, they are not who are working on that, as a staff, or they are, even though they are implementing genocide policy or a lot of involvement in the atrocity, but they are still good willingness them inside their heart, that we have to find their heart, to aware of, and then what we do or documentation or what we do, some kind of factual, analytics, they know what I do, what we do. But
and Mio, one question. To put an example,
yes,
a very concrete example. No? So before the coup, we had the Ministry of Immigration in Myanmar, military control, very conservative, very racist.
right.
What tactic did you use with this Ministry of Immigration? Did you do any public statement or semi-public? Did you meet them privately? What will be your tactic with this ministry
Right.
that controlled the documentation of the Rohingya, no? For example.
Yes, yes, we used to do with the different organization for the public statement, together with the different statement, different organization together, for maybe like, collective voices we do. We used to do with the collective voices with the statement in publicly, but dealing with the ministry, we are not doing for the public statement or public, making notorious them that we have to deal with them. So that we have two strategy. We work with the other group, that means we are one of them. We are part of it, but we also showing the voice. But at the same time, we do advocacy. Oh, many organizations are doing for that. A lot of challenge for them. So we do advocacy our informal way to the ministry, to reach to the place, so I mean, that's, two-way, showing, public voice with we are one of them with others. At the same time, we are also doing advocacy with the line ministry. Particular, we are approaching who are a little bit flexible, that we have to identify mapping. Is you already learned in level.
And if you are front to front with a Ministry of Immigration official, with his military uniform, very formal, big chair, did you use a positive messaging or negative denunciation? What will be your approach?
Oh, right. So from them, negative or positive from them or from us?
From you, would you say, oh, we like so much the work that you do. Could you please do it a bit better? Or do you say, okay, you are doing something wrong?
No, we can say like this. We can say like this. We are trying to approach very positive message, to get in, after we have some kind of little bit, trust each other, we started to touch with something pinpoint, to them. Oh, we have to change this. We have to do that. We have to do. If we try to, could you please help, something like that, very approach. It's like, also the right person you have to choose who will be touching with the right person is very important, So
who with a name and a last name. Very good. We need to move on because we don't have so much time, but there will be time for questions and answers.
Sure.
So thank you, Eumeo, for your words. Now, please, let's have Ethan, basically with the same questions. What do you see? What is your tactical approach? What works? What approaches work? In which circumstances? And do you have to say anything about persuasive communication also? So the floor is yours, Ethan.
Okay, great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I think that the sort of work that I do it's quite different from what Mio does. It's quite different, I think, to what a lot of you are already working on in your career. So hopefully I'll be sort of an interesting person coming from one side, let's say, that might be a little bit different from what you're typically discussing or working on in this program. So Organizing for Power is a skills-based training program for organizers worldwide. It was started in 2019 as a collaboration between the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation and the trainer, organizer, theorist Jane McAlevey, with myself serving as the coordinator since it began. Since we have started, we have trained up around 33,000 people in about 1,500 organizations from 110 countries in 16 languages, I believe. That number actually rises if you include individuals. It rises to about 40,000 from something like 150 countries, but we no longer allow individuals to participate in the program. And this is sort of an entry point to what it is that we are about. So we only allow groups of 10 plus to participate, any organizing group. It is, as has been mentioned, more focused on trade unions. So I would say 75%, 80% of our 1,500 groups have been trade unions or worker organizations. But that still leaves a healthy 20 to 25%, which are climate justice activists, housing justice activists, political parties, community organizations, a smattering of different organizations working for change, and typically progressive change. But this fact of only allowing groups is really at the heart of what we believe and teach, which is that real lasting change only happens when masses of people are at the center of that change. So connected to this is a belief that we, the people in this room, let's say, I don't know all of you that well, but broadly speaking, people who mostly agree on most things spend too much time talking to each other. Not to denigrate this meeting, this is an important meeting, but in general, over the course of our political activities, we spend too much time talking to each other and not enough time talking to people who do not already agree with us. So the question that we're probing and organizing for power is, how do we reach these people that don't agree with us? How do we talk to them? How do we win them over into progressive campaigns for change? And our short answer to this is organizing. So we distinguish organizing. Before telling you what it is, I'm going to tell you a little bit what it's not. We distinguish organizing from mobilizing, which is when you get a bunch of like-minded people to turn out for a protest or for a one-off event. And we distinguish it from advocacy, which is where you do work on behalf of other people. Now, this isn't to say that we are critical of mobilizing. We're not critical of mobilizing. We're not critical of advocacy as such. To the contrary, we view them both as important, but when shorn from real bases of people organized around shared interests at the center of the campaign or project, we think that neither advocacy nor mobilizing is enough to generally be able to affect lasting change. So organizing, from our perspective and the way that we teach it, is about building disciplined majority or even supermajority campaigns in structure-based settings. A structure-based setting could be a church, could be a school, be a workplace. It's anywhere that people with different ideologies and different backgrounds are bound by a common structure and framework, setting measurable and obtainable objectives for these campaigns, running escalating series of actions, tactics, we call them structure tests, but there are different names for them, which are up to and can include strikes, then winning those campaigns and using those victories as the basis to consolidate and to fortify the totality of the structure-based setting, and then springboarding from that first victory to a next one, which could be more ambitious in a vertical sense, like more pay or better housing conditions, or in a horizontal sense, like standing in solidarity with a like-minded campaign taking place elsewhere in the world, demanding support for a people elsewhere in the world who's facing violence and oppression. So organizing for power teaches methods and tactics of how to build just such an organizing campaign that is disciplined and well-equipped to win. We teach leader identification, which is how do we go into a structure-based setting and differentiate who is the organic leader from who is the activist. Oftentimes activists think of themselves as leaders. It's not often the case. I am not a leader in such a setting. I would be an activist. We teach semantics, which is like how to stop using we and focus on I or you to increase accountability, right? So there's not some sort of general we. There's no structure anywhere else that's going to do this for you. You are going to do it as part of this organizing group. We teach structured organizing conversations, how to have a tough one-on-one with somebody who does not already agree with you. What are the tactics and the methods of that conversation? Listening 30% of the time, listening 70%, talking 30%. There are a bunch of things I could go into more detail on. We teach charting, which is similar to mapping, but is more focused on whole person organizing, whole worker organizing. Where can we find power structures within a structure-based setting? Who is the person who has the keys that can unlock the person whose mind we need to change in a campaign? And structure tests, which, as I've mentioned, are a series of escalating actions. It can start with everybody wearing a button in support of X within a campaign, but with a threat that if the voices of those people who are holding those buttons, wearing those buttons, are not listened to, the next action will escalate in the direction of something along the lines of a strike, and how each of these fit together well in a well-run campaign. So yeah, I'm not going to speak for too much longer. I know we said 7 to 10 minutes, and I'm at 7 minutes right now. Everything I've just described is something that we're doing already in our large format programs, which are free, in which any of you can come to, so long as you have a group of 10 people that you're coming with. Our next one is in April, May of 2024. We do it with global unions such as Public Services International. We do it in regionally bounded areas, helping to develop a curriculum specially adapted to the organizing challenges in the Philippines. We do it in sector or shop-specific contexts. We're working with Amazon workers. We're working with women bus drivers in Ghana and Senegal who are seeking to stop gender violence in the workplace. And we also occasionally hold one-off events that are open to a broader public. And we're actually holding one of those on the 2nd of December, Saturday, featuring an interview with Jane McAlevey, Wants to Be Done in This Current Moment, and which we also invite you to join. I'll share a link in just a moment in the chat. So I'll just close by saying that we don't view this theory of change as being exclusive or inimical to others. We do, however, think that many campaigns for human and social rights have gotten very far away from centering the people who were impacted by those rights violations. And we also think, and this is related, that we, in the broader progressive sphere, have in certain points lost sight of what winning actually looks like. So in that context, and there are loads of important and good reasons for that. That's an understandable context that we find ourselves in. But in that context, we view what we are doing as a useful corrective in some ways, particularly, again, in the labor movement, but not only, with important lessons that hopefully all of you can garner about what we really need to do to make progressive change happen. So I'll leave it there to ensure there's plenty of time for questions or conversation. Thanks to Matt, to the rest of the colleagues for having me, and of course, my appreciation to all of you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ethan. That was fantastic and very well articulated. I think you mentioned very interesting ideas like distinguishing between mobilizing, organizing, and advocating, no? Following the Latin meaning of advocating, no, which is to talk on behalf, no. Very interesting. Also, the idea of mobilizing and organizing in a very structured way different organizations and building capacities on this, and then we have these two examples, no, a person like you, Ethan, that is organizing labor rights oriented and other movements in countries where there is an opportunity for progress as little as it is. But then we have Umio Win, who has been working in a country that barely has had any opening for progressive positive changes, and now is an outright military dictatorship. No, so you cannot have the same assumptions, no, on what success is, etc., etc. But I think it's great that we had these two talks, and now I open the floor for anyone who wants to ask any question or make any comment. I see Arzu has the hand up, so please, Arzu, go ahead. You are muted. We still cannot hear.
No, Arzu,
No
whatever
sound.
it is, your sound is off.
Is it better now?
Now, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
I was on the
now
wrong
it is.
setting. Apologies. So I want to thank both speakers for very interesting inputs. And if I understand you correctly, both of you were arguing for a less adversarial approach and one that looks at common interests. So I work in Afghanistan, and the question I have, and I think the context is in a way a little bit similar to Myanmar. What do you do in a context where you cannot actually get to those that are in power and that you want to influence because they will not talk to you, and where this theory of change, of looking at small steps to effect change, is very, very long term. And I'm asking this because we see a very steep decline in the interest of the donors that just tell us the Taliban are so intransigent and any small wins are really not sustainable, and they have reduced funding and they're disengaging. So we really have trouble defining a way forward that will help us make this case for a long-term approach, because societal change really cannot happen overnight. So thank you very much.
And Jose, you have Diane and Josephine. We'll do the three
Very
together.
good. So maybe, yeah, let's group. Go ahead, Diane.
You're muted,
We
Diane.
can hear you.
Sorry. So I was saying thank you very much for this two example. I think it was very, very interesting to hear about what you were sharing. So my question would be around gender. Why trying to develop a strategy or to influence? I would like to have some of your reflection on how gender, like a gender of a person to influence, you know, like you want to influence person at the power. How does gender affect this? And how are you taking this into account in your work? Thank you.
Okay, Josephine. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. My question is more broad, and please correct me if this had been introduced in the beginning. I just jumped in a little bit late. This is on the public participation. I'm not, I don't know about your experiences, but some of the advocacy initiatives or conversations, sometimes in as much as you have the power dynamics, you have done your mapping, there is always the aspect of public participation. Let us get the feedback from the public. But then we are looking at a public that sometimes may not be very much conversant on the actual right we are looking for, or they are aware of it, but the nitty-gritties of it is missing. It's something that I experienced in the past, where we had done all this mapping on the advocacy, who has the power, who will target for this and that, who's friendly to the legislation, who's not. But then there was the bit about the public participation, which sort of pushed us a little bit down, because there are those ones who are more knowledgeable on what was expected of them in terms of those rights we were advocating for. There were also those ones who felt they didn't need it. And from the key partners or the power holders, they were more driven with what the public was supporting. So when it comes to now the mapping of the power, is it also something we need to look into in terms of public participation, and also looking at the theory of change, not just people knowing their rights, but also how they seek for those rights, and also who the partner or the entity that is supposed to provide that particular right, whether they are willing or able to actually provide that. Just putting it across. My thoughts when Ethan was giving the presentation, the power, I kept thinking about that public participation aspect, and whether that is something that we need to consider it. And I know there are different contexts that allow for public participation and others that may not, but majority of it, at least in the, I would say, like, for example, Kenya, Nigeria, we've been tasked to actually be part of the public participation, and the feedback based on what you're advocating for and what is coming from the public is totally different, and it pulls us down. It pulls us down, especially if you are actually having the leading hand to push for some legislation that were supposed to, or you feel will be right for the community, but then they start pull back because of that aspect of either not knowing, well, not being conversant, or not even having utilized the before procedures that would show there are actually gaps. Over to you, Jose and Ethan. Thank you.
Okay. So we have, let's answer these three because we have the question about illiberal regimes, Afghanistan, Myanmar, other, regimes that are totally in the wrong direction at the moment. The question on gender, on how gender influences your tactic, gender considerations, and then this reflection on public participation. So I don't know if maybe Umio, you want to answer the question of, how do we advocate in illiberal context? What is the formula? For example, now, with a military, really cruel military regime taking over Myanmar, What do you do? Do you actually deal with them at all or not? Or do you go with indirect approaches?
We are really, currently we are doing for indirect approach with the military. Not direct approach with them. If we do direct approach, we have two consequences. Number one is like where they are asking to collaborate with them. Second one, this is high risks, this is high risks, they are really illiberal people, they will be, dictatorship. So people have to be, as a principle, we cannot participate or involve or, work with them directly. But at the same time, they are ruling the country. So I mean that, we are also indirectly working with the different channels. So we used to say in that context, among the collaboration of different stakeholder collaboration effort to do change within the community. That means educating, advocating to the public and stakeholder to indirectly move forward to the policy engage. So that way we do, so we cannot say directly with the dealing with the military regime. So I think the similar context in the Afghanistan, similarly, I think. So Taliban, you cannot deal directly, easily. So you can be in the right way to have to be, I have a lot of Afghan scholars here in my university, so they always shared about that, So I mean, that's, I like to highlight that. Secondly, I move forward for the gender dynamic dimension. Obama, or I think in liberal administration has always male dominant, community, even authority level. You cannot find much for the female or, different gender, perspective. They are not legitimized, to be honest. So country, by the law or by the structure, even they are not allowed for LGBT participation officially, So they are always the male dominant community, but we also stay in our all activity. Gender balancing is our own strategy, and based on our theory of change, we used to adapt, and we are not saying gender equality by mouth, but we are doing movement together with gender equality perspective. On that way we are doing approach. The third one is, I think, just in very general, yes, based on our experience, I think we also doing the, mostly in generalist, way of ideology. So Burmese people are very generalist, I can say, because we are not so much specialist. Because if we do one way specialist, we cannot move forward. We are, even though our specialization is A, but we are also dealing with different B, C, D as well. So I mean, that's our current condition on that. So I mean, we can say jack of all, master of none, not that. Jack of all, master of one, just say like this, at least we have to do it. That's the condition, People are so professional, so, one way, and, specialized. It's not easy to achieve, to move forward in the country context, like a condition. That's
okay,
all.
Okay, Ethan, what would you like to answer any of these three topics? You are muted. We should have microphones that automatically.
Yeah, you would think that following, however many years into this with the pandemic and so on and so forth that I would have gotten better at unmuting myself. I know we only have a few minutes left. I'll try to give a sort of a comprehensive response to the three really good questions and interventions. Starting at the top, though, it is important for me to say that I've done very little work in totally illiberal regimes, and I would be really hesitant to give anybody the answers about what to do in a place like Afghanistan. What I can say is that our approach is actually very adversarial. It's just that we seek to first build unity with those whom we believe are on our side or could be on our side, to build a larger we, and then to take a very adversarial approach towards, in most cases, the bosses of big companies or whatever the case may be. I can also say that in a very difficult situation where you find yourself sort of in a swamp and stretched very thin strategically and tactically, we would typically recommend to find a structure-based setting where you have some capacity to build a majority. And the more difficult the surrounding circumstances, the larger that majority should be. So it could be in a progressive mosque, or it could be in a school, or whatever the case may be. And to look for something that you can win, that you can build a winning campaign around, even if that win is not the grandiose win of, ejecting the Taliban and completely reforming Afghan society. Look for something smaller that moves in that direction that you can win as a proof of concept and as a building block towards future victories. Winning is contagious. Really, I know it sounds very simple, but it is. In a context where people aren't winning anything, bring them together, win something. I think that this speaks also to the third question about how people organize for their rights, particularly in situations where there might be adversaries in the community. We do and advocate for a huge amount of running of surveys, not anonymous whenever possible, where we actually get people's names. And of course, if we're looking at this in terms of a workplace, and we ask people their three biggest priorities, we're going to get 1,000 priorities, and some of them are going to be contradictory, right? And it's going to be our work as organizers and as campaign strategists to sort of do the constellational work of figuring out where we can bring together the largest majority around, let's say 3 priorities that similarly we view as both progressive and as scalable, while at the same time being obtainable. What are some things that we can actually win that can also give resonance toward future victories? And I can say that, we've had real big successes, for example, recently in Berlin with the Berlin hospital workers, with a community that was opposed because it was the middle of the pandemic and they didn't want hospital workers organizing or going on strike. And we refocused the campaign around the provision of quality healthcare services for the people of Berlin, mounted a wide-scale campaign throughout the entire city, including with faith leaders, including in schools and elsewhere, and got critical actors to change people's minds. This is not about a bunch of greedy nurses who are putting you at risk during the pandemic. This is about people who are advocating for your rights as a consumer of healthcare and as a resident of this city. So finding ways to reframe and refocus the debate and bring critical actors on board through this charting process. And lastly, about gender, I mean, it's kind of, on the one hand, we as Organizing for Power have baked it into our structure. So I'm a guy sitting here talking to you. I'm pretty much the only man who's part of the leadership group. And so we have, our lead trainer is a woman. The majority of our trainers are women. Majority of the labor movement, in fact, is women. And the sectors that we focus on in our work also have a very strong gender lens. For example, working with care workers, with unorganized workers, working with the so-called qualified public sector jobs, teachers, nurses, etc. And then I would say similarly, and I mentioned this in my first comments, You can take the sort of approach to building winnable campaigns that I outlined in my first comments and apply it in an explicitly gender-based setting. For example, around women bus drivers in Ghana who are being assaulted when they're trying to run their bike routes, their bus routes, and who are then going back to their workplace and facing a discrimination, gender-based discrimination in their workplace. At the same time, these women make up the majority of that union. If we bring them on board around a collective campaign, we can center this issue of gender discrimination, again, within a structure-based setting where we're not healing all of society's woes as they pertain to gender, because there are many, many, many of them, but we are taking something that we can win and showing real progress can then be built on going forward. So there's a little bit of an attempt to speak to all three of the questions.
Thank you very much. I think those were very interesting reflections. Maybe we could also think of creativity in tactics. No, Matt and me were looking before at a tactic used in a conflict setting where areas that will be attacked by drones. They came up with this idea of, here it is, posting pictures of the children that live in the neighborhood that can be seen from the drone, no? And in this type of strategy, the message is the tactic, right? So there are also ways to create tactics that are a bit outside of the box. Then last week I was listening to a podcast. It's a Spanish podcast about many different social issues, and it's just the actors, just sharing their experiences, sharing their experiences and telling them, how difficult it is to be a nurse during the pandemic, or if you have been abused, and this is also a tactic, to give the voice to the victims or to the persons that are interested. I saw a few hands and then they disappeared, but I think we still have time for a couple of questions. Jamie, one key.
Thank you very much, Jose. I just wanted to thank Ita and Neil for the very, very insightful presentations. My question really has to do with settings and context of profound fragility and conflict, where we have a complete collapse in state authority. Let's call that context the Central African Republic, for example, back in 2013, where you're dealing with multiple armed groups, a very limited access of state presence. The UN's collective posture is that these armed groups are spoilers and should not be dealt with, and you're on the ground trying to advocate effectively to ensure that sexual and gender-based violence don't occur. So in the context of mismatch, where from the top, the messaging is tough, and then the bottom, you need to collaborate, at least nudge. The word collaboration is too hard. You need to nudge some of these armed group leaders to at least understand why, gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence should not be perpetuated. How do you, if you could share from your experiences, how you can really calibrate your tactics to address this sort of issue, where on one hand you're pushing and trying to nudge and make sure that this is an issue that is topical and it's not done, but you don't want to be very confrontational. You don't want to name and shame, because that's going to deprive you of the access you need in the first place to do that. And in the context where just meeting with one group, armed group, to talk about these issues might be perceived by the population as a form of complacency, or by another armed group, as a form of collaboration. So I was just wondering if at all you can share some experiences about this. Thank you.
Umio, Win, or Ethan, whoever wants to go. I think we have time for this last comment.
This is a question for Mio, much more so than for me, to be really honest.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. It's just also very difficult, and we also dealing with a lot of the insurgent group, for the arms group, and then, so, it's really hard, you know, for of course, the gender-based violence issue in Burma is huge, you know. So even in genocidal, you know, a lot of gender-based violence issue is happening, you know, all over the country, you know. There is no well enough policy, but civil society, member of civil society stay doing advocacy to the public awareness than the government advocacy. Public awareness, public more aware of this condition or this situation, they can, we keep ourselves, you know, we control ourselves, we educate ourselves, and then we trying to improve our condition, you know, not by the authority, not by the, you know, policy level, you know, but that is a way we are trying to overcome that, you know, in that sense, you know, now a lot of people are moved to the jungle area from the main city. So there is also a lot of male dominant, you know, arms group leader, you know, different, arms group, you know, leader has also very male dominant. So mean challenges a lot by the mostly in the female or LGBT people big challenge in the ground. So I mean they also stay educating ourselves. So that way our tactics is, you know, ourselves, educating ourselves. That is like also we call the public advocacy. That's public education, you know, public advocacy, education, something like that. Thank you.
Very good. We will also, by the way, have a special session on non-state actors and why they should see in their interest complying with humanitarian law. But we will talk about that in another day. Matt, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, first, Myo and Ethan, thank you so much for joining us. That's the first part. Now I'm going to try and pull together a number of things I'd like everybody to have in their minds as they go away from this session. And by the way, I'm one of those 130 plus thousand that Ethan has trained, and that's the kind of the points that he's raised there have sat with me ever since in our work, and I wish we could develop a humanitarian version of what you do, and it's really, really important how they work. And also as well for our course in particular, advocacy being more art than science, right, which is where we are most of the time, it is not a silver bullet, and we need to put it into a broader context of the work that we're trying to do. So a couple of things. First, Arzu, Afghanistan, if you or anybody else want to talk to us in more detail about a particular topic, just write and we will set up a time for you. Afghanistan, in particular, I've heard this same message come from civil society, and they've gone public with it. So your first partner should be some of these organizations, and I think there could be an interesting way to start building a movement on how civil society are talking about, we want the donors to fund and to talk to the Taliban. They are saying it. So if we have the same message, you're starting with what Ethan would have said, you know, this quick win. You've already got someone that you can join in with. For a good example, Jamie on GBV, Francesco from UNFPA, his example, how he's approaching it is really, really excellent. And I know you've done a lot of the similar work as well, but I find that the UNFPA representatives around these thorny issues, engaging with GBV and FGM, how they go about it is really, really smart. Now, the main things I want to say, right? First, Myo, content, analysis, consistently going back and understanding the context. That's what sets you in a position of authority. And it's also for persuasive communication. If you don't know what you're talking about, like a skilled negotiator or mediator will quickly undermine you, and you've lost your credibility in front of them. You really have to know the context. The second thing that Myo said, which was practical for and you said it beautifully, Myo, really practical for engaging persuasively with people, was to understand the goodwill in their heart. That's how you said it, but it's putting yourself into their shoes, understanding their motivations. And as Ethan has pointed out, our major flaw is we spend too much time talking to each other and not to the difficult characters, and there are ways to do that. So Ethan has given us some great tips. You making that responsibility, putting the accountability on them, which is something we often talk about in humanitarian response. Where's the accountability? And you also have within the course, you have this video this week on persuasive communication. You'll have another one, not next week, maybe the week after, on dealing with difficult negotiations from a Swiss mediator, political mediator and negotiator. So they're both there. But that step to put yourself into the shoes of the other person is really essential, and you can't do that without the context. The next thing is this various modes in tandem of tactics that you can apply. Informal, you can be direct and you can be brutal if you wish in a private setting, if that is the best choice. But you won't know what the best one is if you haven't spent the time on the context, on the analysis, and on building the relationships that you need. So Myo said, we know who the person is, we know where he or she is sitting, and we know the way they're thinking. And we have to get down to that level to do that. Because the way you kind of summed it up was, we want to get to the right person, and we're using lots of flexible and different approaches. Now, from Ethan, I want you to start thinking about that structure that he talked about. What are we basing our initial tactics on? Is it within ourselves, let's say humanitarian UN organization, NGO, civil society, faith-based organization? Where are we going to start testing the waters, let's say? And then the measurable objectives we covered in week 1, but that's it. What are we actually asking for? And the crucial question that Ethan, I hope I'm not misrepresenting you, and I've been a good student in the past, was this: what's winning, what winning looks like. If we don't have the change in mind that we want to see, we won't have an impact. And the process itself is getting us towards that change. And too often we fail, let's be honest, in humanitarian work to see that protective change happen. Yet, this is why we particularly wanted you today, Myo and Ethan, is that the trade unions, you see them, they're winning. You can see that the labor movement is making progress. We can take some of their tools, we can take some of their approaches and tactics, and this collective organizational approach that they're using to make a difference. And that's where we're going to go next week with the power of collective advocacy and collective approaches. So I'll stop there and I'll hand it back to you, Jose.
Okay, very quickly, because we are running out of time. I mean, I will just a reflection that I've been in many situations where you do positive messaging and positive approaches, and then they lead to nothing, you know, and then you've had a nice meeting with a ministry official, you talk about football, you had a coffee, so what, you know? So I think there are opportunities and costs to positive and negative adversarial advocacy that you have to reflect on the failures, no? And the reality is, with advocacy, normally we have failures, so you have to be prepared to fail and to learn from as much as you can. But anyway, just to prepare for the next week, we have our homework that today you've been doing a great job. And this week, what you have to do is this: to look at the objectives that you developed, the stakeholder mapping that you did, and just now add what tactics do you consider more appropriate in your context. And you can do that either in the Padlet or in the Word document, that those of you that are working on the Word document, or in the group work that we will have tomorrow. If any of you has not yet come to this task, you are welcome to just join. You know, just come, go to the Padlet. You don't need to do anything out of the ordinary, but your reflections, your comments are always welcome. So please do it. I think it will be good for you. And so far, the strategies that we are seeing developing are really a very good educational tool for putting yourself in the feet of an advocate. No? So I think that's it for next week. We will be seeing tomorrow those of you that are in the group work, and we will be in touch. And as Matt says, if you want to discuss anything, if you're interested in any topic, shoot an email. We'll be happy to discuss with you. Anything else, Matt?
No, thank you, Mio. Thank you, Ethan. We really appreciate it. Have a nice week,
Thank you
everybody.
all. We're staying a little bit for anybody that wants to have any question about the course. So we stay for 10 more minutes.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ethan.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Very good.
Stop recording. Let me stop the recording.
Okay.
I did. No. Stop.